The letter arrived on a Thursday. Not to me. I never saw it. I know it arrived on a Thursday because 18 years later, when I finally held the original envelope in my hands, still sealed, still crisp at the edges in the way of paper that has been stored carefully rather than thrown away, the postmark read April 14th, 2006, and April 14th, 2006 was a Thursday. I know it was stored carefully because the person who kept it did not throw things away. He kept receipts going back to 2001. He kept tax documents and labeled binders. He kept every piece of paper that passed through the house on Crestwood Drive with the methodical attention of a man who understood, on some level, that documentation is power. He kept the Harvard letter. He kept it in a locked box in the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath his passport and his marriage certificate, and a folder of insurance documents, in a house where I lived for 18 years and never once knew the drawer had a lock. My name is inside that letter. My name and an offer of full admission to Harvard University, class of 2010, with a full merit scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and a stipend for academic expenses. The offer was made to me. It was never given to me. My name is Nadia Ose. I'm 34 years old. I am a senior admissions counselor at Harvard University. I have spent the last 6 years sitting across from 18-year-olds who are the first in their families to apply to a school like this, and I have spent every one of those years doing something that my colleagues describe as going above and beyond, but that I understand as something more personal. I make sure every letter reaches the person it's meant for. I make absolutely certain of it, because I know what happens when it doesn't. I know what 18 years of a life looks like when the letter is kept in a locked drawer. I know because that life was mine. And I know because 8 months ago, my brother Marcus walked into a faculty meeting at Harvard's Department of Economics, where he has been an assistant professor for 4 years, and found me sitting at the table. He looked at me the way you look at something you buried a long time ago and have just watched climb out of the ground. I looked at him the way you look at someone when you finally understand the complete dimensions of what they took from you. I said, "Hello, Marcus." He didn't say anything. He sat down. The meeting proceeded, and everything that had been locked in a drawer for 18 years came open. Yeah, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, which is the kind of city that produces people who work hard and expect little and are surprised sometimes when the world offers them more than they planned for. My father, Charles Osei, came to Ohio from Ghana in 1987 with a degree in civil engineering, $200, and the particular determination of a man who had left something behind and intended to build something forward. He got a job with a municipal engineering firm. He married my mother, Abena, in 1990. They bought the house on Crestwood Drive in 1992. By the time I was born, in 1991, the structure of the family was already set. My brother Marcus was 3 years older than me. Marcus was, from the beginning, my father's project. I want to be careful about how I say this, because my father loved me. I believe that. I have always believed that, and the belief has survived everything that came after, battered but intact, the way certain things survive damage by becoming something different on the other side of it. He loved me. He also had a vision for the family that was shaped before I was born and that had, at its center, Marcus. Marcus was the firstborn son. In my father's framework, built from the specific combination of his own upbringing, his immigrant experience, and the weight of what he had left Ghana to build, the firstborn son was the continuation, the investment, the one whose trajectory would determine the family's trajectory. I was the daughter. I was also, inconveniently for the framework, the one who was good at school. Not good the way teachers say a student is good. Cooperative, attentive, a pleasure to have in class. Good the way that occasionally made teachers quiet in a way I didn't understand until I was older. Good the way that produced, in 7th grade, a standardized test score that my homeroom teacher brought to the principal, who called my parents, who came to school in the middle of a Tuesday and sat in the principal's office while Mrs. Daniels explained that their daughter had scored in the 99th percentile nationally and that there were programs, opportunities, academic pathways that they should know about. My father listened. He nodded. He thanked Mrs. Daniels for her time. In the car on the way home, he said, "School is important for everyone, Nadia, but don't let it go to your head." I was 12. I did not know what to do with that sentence. I filed it away and kept studying. Marcus was, by the time I reached high school, already understood within the family as the one who would go to college. Not because Marcus was exceptional academically. He wasn't, or at least not in the way I was, not in the way that made teachers quiet. He was smart enough, capable enough, a solid B-plus student who played basketball and had a wide circle of friends, and moved through the world with the specific ease of a person who has been told, consistently, that the world will accommodate him. He was being prepared for it. The college fund, which my parents had been building since Marcus was born, was discussed at dinner as Marcus's college fund. Not a family college fund. Marcus's. When I asked my mother at 15 whether there would be money for me to go to college, she looked slightly uncomfortable and said, "We'll figure it out, Nadia. There are scholarships." "Scholarships for what?" I said. "For students who work hard," she said. "You work hard." She said it as a compliment. I understood it as a directive. I worked harder. I took every AP class my high school offered. I joined the debate team, the math Olympiad, the Model UN. I wrote a research paper on urban infrastructure development in sub-Saharan Africa that my AP government teacher submitted to a statewide competition without telling me, and which won. In my junior year, my guidance counselor, a woman named Ms. Patricia Webb, who wore the same 3 cardigans on rotation and who I will be grateful to until I die, called me into her office and said, "Nadia, I want to talk to you about your options." She had a folder on her desk. "I've been doing some research," she said, "because I think you may not fully understand what your academic profile looks like from the outside." She opened the folder. She had printed information about 8 universities. Harvard was at the top of the list. "I know it seems," she started. "Far," I said. "Out of reach," she said. "I know it might seem that way. I want you to hear me clearly. It is not out of reach for you. Not even close." I looked at the Harvard page. I had looked at it before, late at night on the family computer, in the way that teenagers look at things they want and have learned to want quietly. "The application fee," I said. "Fee waiver," she said. "You qualify easily." "My parents," I started. "The financial aid at schools like this," she said, "is specifically designed for families with your household income. You would likely pay less than you would at Ohio State." I looked at the folder. What about my brother?" I said. Ms. Webb looked at me carefully. "What about him?" she said. "He's applying to Ohio State this year," I said. "My parents are focused on that. I don't know how they'll react to this." Ms. Webb was quiet for a moment. "Nadia," she said, "this is your application, your future. Your parents' focus on your brother doesn't determine what you're allowed to want." I sat with that for a long time. "Will you help me?" I said. "That's why I called you in here," she said. I applied to 8 schools. Ms. Webb and I worked on the applications for 3 months, after school, on weekends, in the early mornings before first period, when the building was mostly empty and the hallways smelled like floor cleaner and possibility. I told my parents I was applying to colleges. My father said, "Ohio State has a good program." I said, "I'm applying to some other places too." He said, "Don't get your hopes up for places you can't afford." I said, "Ms. Webb says there's financial aid." He looked at me over the top of his newspaper. "We'll see," he said. He went back to reading. My mother said, later in the kitchen, "Don't upset your father with this, Nadia. He has a lot on his mind with Marcus's applications." "I'm not trying to upset anyone," I said. "I know," she said. "Wait, be realistic." I went back to my room. I finished my Harvard essay. It was about my father's career in civil engineering and what it meant to build things that last. I meant every word of it. The college decisions came in April. Most of them came by email, which meant I could check them on my phone in my room with the door closed. The Ohio State acceptance came first. I was accepted with a partial scholarship. Then Yale, accepted, full need-based aid. Then Princeton, accepted, full scholarship. Each one landed in my email like a small, private explosion that I absorbed alone in my room and then carried downstairs to dinner and did not mention because I had learned over 17 years that my accomplishments in this house were most safely stored in silence. The Harvard decision was different. Harvard sent letters, not emails. Letters. Physical mail, in the specific oversized envelope that means yes, rather than the thin envelope that means no. The mail came while I was at school. My father worked from home on Thursdays. He was in his office when the mail arrived. He collected it from the mailbox himself. I came home at 3:47 p.m. on that Thursday, and my father was in the kitchen drinking tea, and the mail was stacked on the counter, and I sorted through it looking for the envelope I had been waiting for since January. It wasn't there. I went through the stack twice. Bills, a catalog, something for my mother from her book club, something for Marcus from Ohio State. His orientation information, I assumed. No Harvard envelope. I told myself it hadn't come yet. I waited 2 more days. I checked my email obsessively. On the 3rd day, I asked my father if there had been any other mail. Nothing important, he said without looking up. On the 5th day, I logged into the Harvard applicant portal. The decision status said, "Your admissions decision has been mailed. Please allow 7 to 10 business days for delivery." On the 8th day, I went to Ms. Webb. "It should have arrived by now," she said, frowning at her calendar. "Let me call the admissions office." She called while I sat across from her. She identified herself, explained the situation, gave my name and applicant ID. I watched her face. Something shifted in her expression. "I see," she said. "And the decision was—" She paused. "Yes, I understand. Thank you." She hung up. She looked at me for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. "Nadia," she said carefully, "the admissions office has your decision logged as mailed on April 12th. It should have arrived by now." "It didn't," I said. "Did anyone else collect the mail that day?" she said. I thought about my father in the kitchen on Thursday. He's a stack of mail on the counter. Nothing important. "My dad was home," I said. Ms. Webb was very still. "Is it possible," she said, choosing each word, "that he collected it and set it aside somewhere?" I thought about my father, about the framework, about Marcus's college fund, about don't get your hopes up for places you can't afford, about be realistic. "Yes," I said. "Do you want me to—" she started. "No," I said. "I'll handle it." I went home. I asked my father directly, "Dad, did a letter come from Harvard?" He looked at me. "No," he said. He looked me in the eyes. He said no. I went to my room. I sat on my bed. I was 17 years old, and my father had just looked me in the face and lied to me, and I knew it, and I could not prove it, and I did not know what to do with this specific, vertiginous feeling of a world reorganizing itself around a new piece of information. I called Ms. Webb that night. I asked him, I said. He said no. She was quiet. "Nadia," she said, "the admissions office told me something else." "What?" I said. "They said the decision was an acceptance." The word landed in my chest like something physical. "Acceptance?" "They confirmed it," she said. "Full merit scholarship. The whole package." I sat in my room with my phone against my ear and the specific silence of a house where a man was watching television downstairs. And I thought about the locked drawer in his desk that I had noticed once and asked about and been told contained important documents, and I understood in that moment with the clarity that comes when a collection of small observations suddenly assembles itself into a complete picture. The letter was in the drawer. My father had it. He had read it. He had decided. And he had looked me in the face and said, "No, I want to stop here because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why didn't you fight? Why didn't you go to the desk? Why didn't you call Harvard yourself? Explain. Ask for an extension." I want to tell you about being 17 in a house where the framework is air, where you breathe it so constantly you stop noticing it as a construction rather than a fact. My father was not a monster. He was a man with a vision that did not include me in the role I wanted. He was a man who had decided, before I was born, how the family worked and what it was for and who carried it forward. He was a man who loved me and also, without ever using the word, had decided that what I wanted was a problem he could solve by making it disappear. I was 17. I had been taught my entire life to be realistic. I had been taught that my accomplishments were best kept quiet. I had been taught that the framework was not mine to question. I looked at the drawer. I went to bed. The next morning, I accepted Ohio State. Ms. Webb cried. I didn't. I had already started building the wall I would need to function. I did not apply for extensions. I did not call Harvard. I did not confront my father. I was 17 years old, and I believed in the particular way of children who have been slowly taught to believe it, that what my father decided was the shape of what was possible. I went to Ohio State on partial scholarship. I waited tables to cover the rest. I did not speak about Harvard for 8 years. And I need to tell you that what those 8 years looked like, because the story I'm telling you is not just about a letter. It is about what happens to a life when someone removes a door from it and then stands in front of the wall and says there was never a door there. Ohio State was fine. I want to be precise about that, not dismissive. The professors were good. The program was solid. I studied economics because I was good at it and because my father, when he heard my major, nodded in a way that was the closest he came to expressing approval. I graduated in 4 years with a 3.97 GPA and $60,000 in student loans because the partial scholarship had not covered everything and I had not known how to navigate the financial aid system without the guidance that places like Harvard provide as a matter of course and that Ohio State provides, the if you know to ask. I did not know to ask. I got a job at an education nonprofit in Columbus working on college access programming for first-generation students. I was good at it. Better than good. I had a particular effectiveness with students from families where the framework made college feel impossible, where the parents' vision and the students' vision were not the same thing, and I understood from the inside the specific texture of that gap. I spent 3 years there. I spent those years watching students with profiles like mine navigate systems I had not been allowed to navigate, and I spent those years with a specific quiet fury that I converted daily into better work. I also spent those years in my family home because the student loans were real and the nonprofit salary was modest, and the housing market in Columbus in 2012 was not kind to 22-year-olds with debt. And my parents had offered the spare room, and I had accepted because the alternative was worse. My father and I lived in the same house for 3 years after college. We did not discuss Harvard. We did not discuss the drawer. We discussed the dinner and weather and the news, and Marcus, who had graduated from Ohio State and joined a financial consulting firm in Chicago and was, by all accounts, doing well. Marcus came home for Christmas. My parents lit up when he walked in the door. I watched this and felt the specific sensation of understanding something you have always known but have never allowed yourself to name. But in my second year at the nonprofit, something happened. I was running a college application workshop for high school seniors. A girl named Destiny, 17, first generation, the kind of student who reminded me of myself in the way that is both energizing and painful, came to me after the session. She said, "Ms. Osei, I got into a school, but my mom doesn't want me to go." "Why not?" I said. "She says it's too far," she said, "and expensive. But there's financial aid." I tried to explain, but she stopped. "But she made the decision before you could finish explaining," I said. Destiny looked at me. "Yeah," she said. I sat with her for 2 hours. We went through the financial aid package. We went through the logistics. We went through the specific language of how to have the conversation with a parent who has made up their mind. At the end, she said, "How do you know all this?" I said, "Because someone should have done this for me." She got to go to her school. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway of the house on Crestwood Drive for 20 minutes. I thought about Ms. Webb, about the folder, about April 14th, 2006. I went inside. My father was watching television. I went to his office. The desk was the same desk. The bottom drawer was the same drawer. I tried it. Locked. I stood in my father's office for a long time. Then I went to my room and opened my laptop and found the email address for Harvard's admissions office. And I wrote, for the first time in 5 years, to someone there. Not asking for anything. Just asking a question. The response came from a woman named Dr. Eleanor Marsh, Associate Director of Admissions. She wrote, "Dear Ms. Osei, thank you for reaching out. I've pulled your file from our records. You were admitted to the class of 2010 with a full merit scholarship. Our records show the decision letter was mailed on April 12th, 2006, to your address in Dayton, Ohio. We never received any response from you regarding the offer. After the enrollment deadline passed, we assumed you had chosen another institution. I want to say your application was one of the strongest in your cycle. The admissions committee discussed you specifically. We were disappointed not to have you join us. Please feel free to reach out if there is anything further I can help clarify." I read that email 5 times. One of the strongest in your cycle. The admissions committee discussed you specifically. We were disappointed not to have you join us. I printed it. I folded it. I put it in my own drawer. And I made a decision that would take me 4 more years to fully execute because I was not ready yet, not in the way I needed to be, not with the tools I needed to have, but that I knew from the moment I folded that email was inevitable. I was going to Harvard on my own terms. And I was going to understand everything that had happened in that house on Crestwood Drive before I was done. I applied to Harvard's Graduate School of Education at 26. The application took me 8 months, not because I struggled with it, because I was meticulous. I had spent 5 years in college access work. I had a portfolio of programs I had designed, students I had placed, outcomes I could document. I had 3 letters of recommendation from people who had watched me work and knew exactly what I was capable of. I wrote my personal statement about a girl named Destiny, and about a workshop on a Tuesday evening, and about the particular work of making sure that doors that have been closed don't stay closed. I did not mention my father. I did not mention April 14th, 2006. I did not mention a letter in a locked drawer. I didn't need to. The statement was true without it. The admissions committee at HGSE admitted me in March. Full fellowship, teaching assistantship, the works. I called Ms. Webb. She cried again. This time, so did I. I moved to Cambridge in August. I did not tell my father where I was going until 2 weeks before I left, at a Sunday dinner, when I said, I've been accepted to Harvard's Graduate School of Education. I'm moving to Cambridge next month. The table was quiet. My father set down his fork. He looked at me. I looked back. I had been waiting for this moment for 9 years, and I had decided, somewhere in those 9 years, that I was not going to perform it. No dramatic confrontation. No accusations. Just the fact, delivered plainly to a table that needed to hear it. Harvard, my father said. Graduate school, I said. Full fellowship. My mother looked between us. That's far, she said carefully. Yes, I said. My father picked up his fork. He went back to eating. He said after a moment, That's good, Nadia. 2 words. 9 years late. Technically accurate. Profoundly insufficient. I finished my dinner. I drove home. I packed. Harvard was not what I had imagined as a 17-year-old looking at a website in the dark. It was better and harder and more specific than imagination allows for. I spent 2 years in the program. I wrote a thesis on systemic barriers in college access for first-generation students from immigrant households, a thesis that my advisor described as one of the most practically grounded pieces of work I've supervised, and that was subsequently published in an education policy journal. At the end of the second year, I received a call from the undergraduate admissions office. They were looking for someone to join their counseling team, someone with a background in college access, someone who understood from the inside the specific barriers faced by first-generation students, someone who could identify students who had been missed. I took the job. I have been doing it for 6 years. I am currently one of the counselors responsible for outreach to underserved communities in the Midwest. I travel to Ohio 3 times a year. I have been to Dayton twice. I have not been to Crestwood Drive. I need to tell you about Marcus, because Marcus is the part of the story I have saved, not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. Marcus had been at Ohio State for 2 years when I applied to Harvard. He graduated in 2009 with a business degree and went into financial consulting, as I told you. The consulting lasted 3 years. Then in 2012, he told my parents he wanted to go back to school for a PhD in economics. My father was supportive. My father was more than supportive. My father, who had spent Marcus's entire childhood building a college fund and pointing the family's resources in one direction, who had spent decades invested in Marcus's trajectory. My father was enthusiastic in a way that I watched from across the family's geography with the specific quiet that I had cultivated for years. Marcus applied to PhD programs. Marcus was accepted at several. Marcus chose Harvard. I know. He chose Harvard. He completed his PhD in 5 years. He was offered a position as assistant professor in the economics department. He accepted. My brother, Marcus Osei, has been a faculty member at Harvard University since 2019. In the institution where I have worked since 2018. In the building where I pass the economics department twice a week. For 4 years, we had managed not to be in the same room. Faculty and admissions staff do not typically overlap. He didn't know I was here. Or if he did, he had decided not to know, which is a different thing that produces the same outcome. I knew he was here. I had known since his faculty profile appeared on the Harvard website in 2019. I had sat with that knowledge for 4 years. I had done my job. I had made sure every letter reached the person it was meant for. I had waited. The meeting was a cross-departmental initiative on first-generation student support. My department had been invited. The economics department had been invited. I knew Marcus was on the faculty committee. I requested to attend. My supervisor said, "Are you sure? You've got a full week." "I'm sure," I said. I arrived early. I chose a seat at the center of the table, facing the door. I opened my laptop. I arranged my materials. I waited. People filed in. And then Marcus walked in. He was 40 years old. He looked like my father had looked at 40. The same broad face, the same careful posture, the same quality of a man who has been told his whole life that the world will accommodate him and has found this to be largely true. He looked up from his phone as he reached the table. He saw me. I watched the sequence on his face. The first fraction of a second, a person seeing a colleague they don't recognize. The second fraction, the specific adjustment of recognition. The third fraction, something more complicated, something that looked across the conference table like a man who has kept a locked drawer in his chest for 18 years and has just watched someone sit down across from him with a key. I said, "Why, hello, Marcus." He sat down. The meeting proceeded. For 50 minutes, we sat at the same table and discussed student support initiatives and financial aid accessibility and the specific barriers faced by first-generation students in elite academic environments. I spoke 3 times. Precisely. Specifically. Each time I spoke, I did not look at Marcus. I looked at the other people in the room, at my colleagues, at the faculty members, at the graduate student representatives, and I spoke about what I knew. About what it costs to grow up in a house where the framework doesn't include you, about the students who arrive at these doors carrying things their families put down for them, about how the work of admissions is not just selection. It is repair. After the meeting, people gathered their things. Marcus walked toward the door. I said without raising my voice, "Marcus!" He stopped. He turned. We were the last 2 people in the room. "I think we should talk," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "Nadia," he said. "Not here," I said. "And not now, but soon." He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He said, "Okay." We met the following Saturday. A coffee shop in Cambridge Neutral Ground, chosen by me. I arrived first. Marcus arrived exactly on time, which told me he had not wanted to be seen waiting. He ordered coffee. We sat across from each other. He looked like a man who had been rehearsing and had decided, somewhere in the rehearsal, that there was no version of this that went well for him. He was right. But that wasn't why I was there. "I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to answer honestly." "Okay," he said. "Did you know?" I said. "About the letter? About the scholarship?" He looked at his coffee. He looked at his hands. He looked at the window. He did not look at me. "Marcus," I said. "Not at the time," he said. "When?" I said. A long pause. "My second year of grad school," he said. "I was home for Christmas. Dad and we had a conversation about my funding, my PhD. He was explaining the finances, how they'd managed it." He paused. "He mentioned yours." "He mentioned mine," I said. He said he'd made a decision, that it was the right decision for the family, that you had done fine." He paused. He said, "Harvard wasn't the right place for you." "For me," I said, "or for the family's plan." Marcus didn't answer. "What did you say?" I said. He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't say anything," he said. I sat with that. "You'd been at Harvard for 2 years," I said, "on a scholarship, in the institution that had offered me the same thing 18 years earlier." "I know," he said. "And you didn't say anything," I said. "I didn't know what to say," he said. "It was already done. You had your degree. You had your career. I told myself it had worked out." "It worked out," I repeated. "I know how that sounds," he said. "I don't think you do," I said. "No, not fully." I reached into my bag. I put a folder on the table. He looked at it. "Dr. Eleanor Marsh," I said. "She's been the associate director of admissions here since 2003. She responded to my email in 2013 with a letter confirming my acceptance, the scholarship, the committee's response to my application." I opened the folder. I slid the printed email across. He read it. His jaw tightened slightly. "One of the strongest in your cycle," I said. "The admissions committee discussed you specifically." He set the paper down. "And then," I said, "I have something else." I reached back into the bag. I put a photograph on the table. He looked at it. It was a photograph of the letter, still sealed. The Harvard seal on the envelope, my name and address in the window. The postmark, April 14th, 2006. How? He said very quietly. Mom, I said. His head came up. She found it, I said. When they sold the house last year, when Dad moved to the senior community and they were clearing out the office, she found the lockbox. I watched his face process this. She called me, I said. Like, she didn't tell me what was in it. She just said, oh boy, Nadia, there are some things here that belong to you. She mailed me the contents. She mailed, he started. The letter, I said, still sealed, the original, and 3 other things. I put them on the table one at a time. The first, a printed email dated 2014 from Marcus to my father. Dad, I've been thinking about what you told me at Christmas. I know you did what you thought was right. I just want to make sure Nadia is okay. I think she deserves to know. The second, my father's reply. It's done, Marcus. Leave it alone. She's fine. Focus on your work. The third, Marcus's response. 3 words. Okay, you're right. I let him sit with those 3 words. You thought about telling me, I said. You even drafted an email. Nadia, and then you left it alone, I said. Because he told you to. Because it was easier. Because you were at Harvard on your scholarship, and your career was going well, and the disruption of telling the truth was a cost. You decided I should keep paying instead of you. The coffee shop went about its Saturday around us. Steam wands hissing. Someone laughing near the window. 2 people who grew up in the same house sitting at a small table with 18 years between them. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I know, I said. I should have. Yes, I said. No, you should have. Is there something you want from me? He said. Financially, I don't want your money, I said. Then what do you want? He said. I thought about it. About what I had wanted at 17. About what I had built at 26. About the desk at Harvard where I had spent 6 years making sure letters reached the people they were meant for. I want you to understand something, I said. Not for my sake, for yours. He looked at me. What you didn't say, I said, in 2014, that cost you something too. Not the way it cost me, but something. You've been a faculty member at the institution that rejected me, except they didn't reject me. Our father rejected me on my behalf, and you knew that, and you kept going to work every day and building your career on ground that had something buried under it. He was very still. I'm not going to blow up your career, I said. I'm not going to the department. I'm not going to the press. That's not what this is. Then what is it, he said. It's the truth, I said. Which is what you should have given me 10 years ago. I'm giving it to you now because I think you've been carrying it too, in the particular way of people who know something they didn't do anything about. He looked at the table. What happens now? He said. I go back to work, I said. You go back to work, and you figure out what you do with knowing that you know. I stood up. I picked up my folder. Nadia, he said. Yes, I said. I really am sorry, he said. I looked at him. My brother, 40 years old, building something on a foundation that had my name in it. I know, I said. The conversation with my father happened 3 weeks later. Not in person. My father was in a senior living community in Dayton, and I was in Cambridge, and the distance was both geographical and necessary. On the phone. He answered on the 3rd ring. Nadia, he said, it's good to hear from you. The specific normalcy of it? The way he had always been able to hold the ordinary and the extraordinary in the same breath, as if the space between them was not a chasm you could fall into. Dad, I said, Mom sent me some things from the house. A pause. Things, he said. From the lockbox, I said, in your desk. The pause was longer this time. I see, he said. I have the letter, I said, the original, still sealed. He was quiet. Dad, I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Not the way you answered me at 17. Honestly? Okay, he said. His voice was quieter than it had been. Why? I said, not why did you take it? Not why did you lie? Not why did you steal 8 years from me? Just why? Because after everything, the emails, the photograph, the 3 words Marcus had sent and then buried, that was the only question I still needed He was quiet for a long time. A long time. Long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then he said, I was afraid. I waited. I was afraid, he said again, like that if you left, you wouldn't come back, that you'd build a life so far from us that we'd lose you. You were afraid of losing me? I said slowly. Yes, he said. So you made the decision, I said, that ensured I would never fully trust you again. He was quiet. The logic, I said, of that fear. I know, he said, very quietly. Did it work? I said. Did keeping me close keep you from losing me? He didn't answer, because the answer was self-evident. I had been in Cambridge for 8 years. I came home at Christmas briefly, out of obligation and the residual shape of love. I did not call. I did not confide. I had not told my father where I worked for 3 years after joining Harvard because I had not been ready to hold the irony in a phone call. He had been afraid of losing me. He had lost me anyway. And he had lost me specifically to the place he had tried to keep me from. I'm not calling to punish you, I said. I want to be clear about that. I know, he said. I'm calling because I spent 18 years not asking, I said. And I needed to ask. I needed to hear what you say when there's nothing left to hide. He was quiet. I'm sorry, Nadia, he said. I have always been sorry. I didn't know how to say it. You say it, I said. You find the words and you say it. I'm sorry, he said, again, more completely. I sat with that. It was not enough. It was also, at 68 years old, from a man who had never once admitted a mistake to my face, the most he had ever given me. Thank you, I said. We talked for 20 more minutes about small things, about the senior community and the weather and a show he'd been watching. At the end, before I hung up, he said, Are you happy there? I thought about my office, about the students, about Destiny, who had graduated from her school in 2016, and who had sent me a photo of herself in cap and gown that I had printed and put on my wall, about the letters, about making sure every letter reached the person it was meant for. Yes, I said, I'm happy. Good, he said. His voice held something I recognized, finally, as relief. Not for him, for me. He had always wanted me to be happy. He had just been catastrophically wrong about how to protect that possibility. The letters in my desk drawer, my desk, in my office at Harvard, still sealed. I have thought many times about opening it. I have decided not to, because I know what it says. Dr. Eleanor Marsh told me what it says. The committee discussed me specifically. They were disappointed not to have me. I am here now, 8 years late, on my own road in a way that is entirely mine. I don't need to open the letter to know what was in it. I know what was in it. What I do with that knowledge, how I carry it, what I build from it, that is not in the letter. That is in the work. I want to tell you the truth about Marcus because the story deserves the truth about every person in it. Marcus did not lose his position. I did not go to the department. I did not go to the press. I did not do any of the things that in a different kind of story would constitute the revenge. What I did was continue to go to work, to sit in my office and read applications, to travel to Ohio 3 times a year and run workshops in high schools where the guidance counselors are overworked and the students are exceptional and the framework of their families sometimes does not include the possibilities that their abilities deserve, to make sure every letter reaches the person it's meant for. Marcus requested a transfer to the cross-departmental first-generation student initiative. He now chairs the faculty committee. He is, by all accounts I have heard, doing good work on it. We pass each other in the hallway sometimes. We nod. We are not close. We are not enemies. We are 2 people who grew up in the same house and made different choices and have to live with both sets of choices in the same building. That is not a resolution. That is the truth. The truth is not always resolution. Sometimes it is just the 2 of you in a hallway, nodding, carrying what you know. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone make a decision about your life before you got the chance to make it yourself? Have you ever found out years later that a door was closed before you knew it existed? Have you ever built your way back to a place you were never allowed to go the first time? Tell me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what door you went back for. Because I read every comment. I read them the way I read applications. Looking for the person behind the words. Looking for the one who deserves to be found. Subscribe for new stories every week. Next week, a woman discovers that the car accident that killed her husband was not an accident. She becomes a forensic investigator. 7 years later, she's assigned to a cold case. The file has her husband's name on it. My name is Nadia Osei. I'm a senior admissions counselor at Harvard University. And every Thursday, when the mail comes, I walk to the mailroom myself. I pick up every envelope. I read every name. I make sure every letter reaches the person it's meant for. Because I know what happens when it doesn't. I have always known. I just didn't know for 18 years that I was the proof.